this entire passage, he's talking about the Chinese concepts of copy, you see. One is Fanzipin and the other is Fusipin. There are two concepts. The Fanzipin, you see, differs from the original. Though it is a copy of the original, it differs from the original. And the Fusipin is supposed to be the exact copy of the original. And they treat both at par, right? They treat both at par. But then it all depends at the other end, the recipient at the other end. Like the Western museums, you see, they take it as a humiliation, as an insult, when they are not given the original, but are given, you see, the copy, which is not very much different from the original. Now, the point that he drags on, I say drags on, why? Because he has done it very cleverly. You see, the person who has written this passage, he then brings it to the point of the Far East, right? The Far Eastern notion of identity. For he gives you the example of the Isle of Grand Chine in Japan, which is 1,300 years old, for the millions of Japanese people who go there on pilgrimage every year. Now look at the figure. It is 1,300 years old. If it is so, then it must be a very ancient shrine. It must be a very ancient shrine. But look what he says. In reality, this temple complex is completely rebuilt from scratch every 20 years. Then how can you say it is 1,300 years old? When every 20 years they are building this, you see, from scratch. They are rebuilding the entire temple complex. Then how can you say it is 1,300 years old? The point is it original, or is it again and again being replicated every 20 years? And people go with the same kind of faith and devotion and curiosity as if they were going to watch a 1,300 years old temple. Then he comes to the other example, and he talks about the Cathedral of Freiburg Minster in southwest Germany. And he says it is covered in scaffolding all the year round. And the cathedral, you see, is all the time in a state of damage, and it is continually being built. You see, the attempts are being made to preserve the stones from the Middle Ages, right? Each country, you see, the eroded stones are replaced. Why does he give this example? He's giving this example in order to illustrate, you see, the difference between the copy and the original. You say it is original, but then the stones are being replaced every time. There is damage done there, that is being repaired. Now where is the originality in that? But the point is, once the repair, the damage has been set right, has been repaired, it appears as if, you see, as though the thing is the original. Okay, so in the next paragraph, see what he says. Fundamentally, this is the same operation as with the Japanese shrine, except in this case the production of a replica takes place very slowly and over long periods of time. You see, he says there's no difference between that grand shrine of Japan and this thing, the cathedral. Both are, you see, they are replicated, you see. But the point is, with the Japanese, you see, it takes place very slow and long period of time, right? Whereas, you see, this Japanese takes every 20 years. So that is the point he's trying to make here. And then in the last paragraph, he talks about the intellectual position that explains why Asians, you see, have far fewer scruples about cloning than Europe. He gives the example, you see, from Buddhism, about a Buddhist. And what example does he give? He says, well, Christians called for a ban on cloning. But then Huang, the man, you see, who was a Buddhist, he legitimized his cloning experiments with this religious affiliation. What did he say? I am Buddhist and I have no philosophical problem with cloning. And as you know, the basis of Buddhism is that life is recycled through reincarnation in some ways. I think therapeutic cloning restarts the cycle of life. Now, what has this got to do with all that copy and, you see, replica? It has to do. Cloning is a replica. Cloning is a copy of the original. That is what cloning is. Now, if you were to give as much importance to the copy as to the original, if you were to give that much importance, then the point is anything that is replicated, you see, would be as good as the original. But then there are reservations. People want to go for the original. They don't want to go for the copy. Now, there may be exceptions. It is a thought process. It is a thought where exceptions, you see, spring up. He talked about the Japanese shrine, and I told you it's 1,300 years old. And people go there only because they want to see the original. But the latent point is it's being repaired every 20 years. It's rebuilt from scratch. So what's original about? Even then, people accorded the status of originality, and the same thing goes with the Cathedral of Freiburg. So this is all you see about the passage. And now let's come to the questions. The value that the modern West assigns to an unassailable original has resulted in all of the following except, yes, unassailable original. That is the original that remains, you see, original. So, number one, it discourages them from carrying out human cloning. It discourages them from simultaneous displays of multiple copies of painting. It has resulted in number two. Number two is correct. It discourages them from simultaneous displays of multiple copies of a painting. It allows regular employment for certain craftsmen. It discourages them from making interventions in ancient art. You see, number two, three, four cannot be the answer. The answer is number one, that is accept. It discourages them from carrying out human cloning. Now let's come to the next question. He says, which one of the following statements does not correctly express the similarity between the Eyes Grand Shrine and the Cathedral of Freiburg Minster? Let us look at these statements. Both will one day be completely rebuilt. That's happening. Both can be regarded as very old structures. Yes. Both were built as places of worship. Yes. Both are continually undergoing restoration, right? So this doesn't express the similarity, right? Because Japanese shrine is being rebuilt in 20 years and once in 20 years, and this you see is the scaffolding is there, and it is continually being examined for damage. So there is a difference there, you see. It's not that both of them, you see, are continually undergoing restoration. So number four is the correct answer. Now let's look at the next one. Based on the passage, which one of the following copies would a Chinese museum be unlikely to consider as having less value than the original? So if you remember, the Chinese, you see in the first paragraph, he says the Chinese wouldn't make much difference between the original and the copy. He says that which for the Chinese are of equal value to the original. He says that in the third line. So if you were to go by that argument, if you look at the first one, Pablo Picasso's miniaturized but otherwise faithful and accurate painting of Vincent Gogh's original paint. Pablo Picasso's photograph of Vincent van Gogh's original painting printed to exactly the same scale. Pablo Picasso's painting of Vincent van Gogh's original painting bearing Picasso's signature. You see, the first three cannot be the answer. The last one, Pablo Picasso's painting of Vincent van Gogh's original painting, identical in every respect. Identical in every. That is the correct answer, right? Because the fourth one is what it says, it's more or less like a copy, you see, but then it's treated at par with what you call the original. Now let's come to the next question, and the next question says, which one of the following scenarios is unlikely to follow from the arguments in the passage? Which is unlikely to follow. A 21st century Christian scientist is likely to oppose cloning because of his philosophical orientation. That is correct. He says that a 17th century French artist who adhered to a Christian worldview would need to be completely true to the original intent of painting when restoring it. A 20th century Japanese Buddhist monk would value reconstructed shrine as the original. A 17th century British painter would have no problem adding personal touches when restoring an ancient Roman painting. Now, the one that is unlikely is number two, a 17th century French artist who adhered to a Christian worldview would need to be completely true to the original intent of a painting when restoring it. This is unlikely. The next passage is about Stoicism. You see, Stoicism is a kind of philosophy, you see, which preaches indifference to pain and pleasure, to good and bad. You see, it was founded by Zeno around 300 BC, and it went into the Roman era, you see, up to 300 AD. The point that he's trying to make is the Stoics tell us that there are two kinds of there are two kinds of movements involved in emotions. Now, what is that? I'll just tell you in short. He says that the first movement is when something is said to us and we give an immediate reaction. That is the first movement. The second movement is when you think about the whole thing and then you decide to do something about it. That is the second movement. If somebody insults you, you immediately flush, you get angry, you feel humiliated, but then you keep silent. The second movement involves you meditate, you decide, well, this man insulted me. I am going to take revenge against him. I'll also humiliate him whenever I get a chance, or I'm going to give him a reply, or maybe I might handle him physically. You see, that is the second kind of movement. So the point is, we have to think over anything that is impetuous, anything that is sudden. You see, has to be controlled. And the second movement, you see, gives you a chance to think over the whole thing. I mean, whatever trauma you might have faced, whatever trauma anybody might have faced, right? So to think over. And the Stoics, you see, they believed that we shouldn't have too much desire for money, power, sexual gratification. We can always, you see, think over. When we go for the second movement, we can think over, you see, what we want in life. Now, you had the Epicureans. You see, the Epicureans are followers of the philosopher Epicurus. And Epicurus recommended that you should not involve yourself in gross pleasures. Well, you can go for simple pleasures of life. You can go for good conversation, right? And you can have a nice relationship with your friends, but then immersing yourself, you see, in total pleasures, in total incontinence, you see, will lead to nothing more but only unhappiness and destruction. So the point that he makes here is that we have to be careful about our emotions, our feelings. And then in the last paragraph, you see, you have a person by the name of Oatley who compares, you see, the Stoic ideas to Buddhism. And Buddhism was in India, you see, and Buddha living in India in the 6th century BC. And what Buddha recommended? Buddha recommended that we should create an attitude, you see, that we don't go for the second movements, the destructive second movements. Don't go for the destructive second movements. He says that through meditation and right attitude, right? You can always control your emotions. You can always be a good person, and you can control yourself. That is what Buddha said. But one is advised to observe the emotions without necessarily acting on oneself, acting on them. One achieves some distance and decides what has value and what does not have. Well, you must think, meditate before you react, right? Additionally, the Stoic idea of developing virtue in oneself, of becoming a good person, which the Stoics believed we could do because we have a touch of the divine, laid the foundation for the first three monotheistic religions, that is Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. I mean, the three religions, the Jewish religion, the Christian religion, and Islam religion, they are offshoots, you see, of the philosophy of Stoicism. Why? Because they believe in the essential goodness of man, becoming a good person. That is, the divine is in us. So these religions also tell you to control your emotions, your feelings. Otherwise, you might end up committing sins. In Christianity, you have the 7 deadly sins which are to be avoided. So this is the passage, and now let's come to the questions. On the basis of the passage, which one of the following statements can be regarded as true? The Stoic influences can be seen in multiple religions. The Stoics valorize the pursuit of money, power, and sexual gratification. No, that's false. There were no Stoics in India at the time of the Roman civilization. That's false. The Epicureans believed in controlling all emotions. No. The first one is the answer. The Stoic influences can be seen in multiple religions. I just told you when I concluded, you see, the last lines of the passage, I told you that. The next question, which one of the following statements is false? If false, could be seen as contradicting the facts, arguments in the passage. I mean, if the statement is false, then it would contradict the central argument in the passage. Let us look at the statement. In the Epicurean view, indulging in simple pleasures is not desirable. Is that true? In fact, if you look at the second paragraph, right, it says that people should enjoy simple pleasures. So, number one is the correct option. The Greek philosopher Zeno survived into the Roman era until about AD 300. And the others, you see, in the Stoic view, choosing a reasoned unemotional as the first movement is an appropriate, it's not a first movement. Despite practicing meditation and cultivating the right attitude, emotions cannot ever be controlled. No, the first one is the correct answer. Which one of the following statements would be accurate inference from the example of Marcus Aurelius? Let's see that. Marcus Aurelius was one of the leaders of the Roman army, and then you have Marcus Aurelius was humiliated, was a Stoic philosopher, plotted revenge. 2, 3, 4 are incorrect. Number 1 is the correct option. Why 2, 3, 4 are incorrect? Obviously, 2, 3, 4 are not mentioned, you see, as things that happened. They have no historical veracity, you see. It's only they said that Marcus Aurelius could have done this or could have done that and could have done that if he had been humiliated. So nothing of that kind happened, you see, 2, 3, 4. Now let's look at the next one, and that is through meditation and right attitude. One allows emotions to happen to oneself. It is impossible to prevent this, but one is advised to observe the emotions without necessarily acting on them. One achieves some distance and decides what has value and what does not have value. In the context of the passage, which one of the following is not a possible implication of the quoted statement, right? Not an implication. Okay, emotional responses can make it difficult to distinguish between valuable experiences from valueless experience. Meditation and the right attitude in this instance imply an initially passive reception of all experiences. Meditation allows certain out of body experiences that permit us to gain the distance necessary to control our emotions. No, that is the answer, you see. Number 3 is the correct option because it's not a possible implication, you see, of what has been said in the quoted sentence within quotes. Let's come to the next passage. Here you have the stories you see concerning people who are dead, right? And people believe in ghosts. People believe in what you call the dead coming to life, that is after death, you see. The thing is, what he wants to tell you here is that from time immemorial, people have been believing in the supernatural. He says, from out of our primal darkness of mankind's earliest years come whispers of eerie creatures, not quite alive, yet not quite dead either. Now he says that these could be ancient or primitive deities or gods who dwelt in the forest, or simply those deceased who refused to remain in their tombs and who wandered about the countryside, physically tormenting and frightening those who were still alive. It could be anything. And these sounds, these whispers, he says, it has an impact on the people around. They can terrify, they can disturb, right? So he, you see, goes about describing these things. And then in the next paragraph, when men became civilized, even then you see they could not get rid of these things. He says, so the undead traveled with them, inhabiting their folklore just they had in former times. You see, they are compared to walking dead bodies, walking cadavers. So the thing is, this has not been defined. This has remained vague. Though, of course, mankind, you see, could experience the horror, the terror, you see, that involved these creatures, these appearances. But then, you see, civilization couldn't help. So, I mean, people started talking about so many things. They would say, well, these things can change their shape. These things, you see, these supernatural things, you see, they can assume any shape they like. They can suck human blood. They can influence the minds of people. So, adding these things, talking about these things, what happens is, we intensify that terror. We intensify that feeling of fear, you see, when you talk about the ability of such things, you see, to suck blood and so forth. And then, of course, you had so many so-called magicians and sorcerers coming up and telling you, well, we can control them. You had shamans and witch doctors who claim that they can control the spirits of the departed ancestors. And even now, in the civilized times, these things are happening. People believe in these things. See, it points out here, continued down into more civilized times. Formerly, the invisible spirits and forces that thronged around man's earliest companions had spoken through the tribal shamans, but now, as entities in their own right, they were subject to magical control and could be physically summoned by a competent sorcerer. People believe in them. The sorcerer could summon them. But who knows? What is this all? I mean, even the relationship between the magician, the sorcerer, and the spirit. And sometimes it happens that the magician dies or the sorcerer dies, and then he also joins that train of undead. So, from the Middle Ages and to the age of enlightenment, theories of the undead continued to grow and develop. Their names became more familiar: werewolf, vampire, ghoul, each one certain to strike fear into the hearts of the ordinary human. So, you have what you call all kinds of creations. You see, you call it a vampire, you call it a werewolf, you call it a ghoul, you see. This is all you see in the passage. Now let's come to the questions. All of the following statements, if false, could be seen as being in accordance with the passage. Except the growing sophistication of mankind meant that humans stopped believing in the undead. The relationship between shamans and the undead was believed to be a strong and stable one. Okay. The transition from the Middle Ages to the Age of Enlightenment saw new theories of the undead. The undead remained vague and ill-defined even as mankind strove to understand the horror they inspired. The option number three is the correct option here, right? Because this is an exception. The relationship, the transition from Middle Ages to the Age of saw new theories of the undead. So that is the answer. The next one, which one of the following observations is a valid conclusion to draw from the statement? And now what is the statement? From out of the primal darkness of mankind's earliest years come whispers of eerie creatures not quite alive, or alive in a way which we can understand, yet not quite dead either. So you have to see which one of the following observations you see is a valid conclusion drawn from this statement. We can understand the lives of the eerie creatures in mankind's early years through their whispers in the darkness. That is an activity that he has mentioned, so that cannot be the answer. Long ago, eerie creatures used to whisper in the primal darkness that they were not quite dead. No, we don't have anything of this kind, you see. Mankind's early years were marked by a belief in the existence of eerie creatures that were neither quite alive nor dead. That is the answer. You have that, I think, in the second paragraph or in the first paragraph, you see, you have that. That is the correct option. Mankind's primal years were marked by creatures alive with eerie whispers but seen only in the darkness. No, that is not the answer. The next question. In order to confirm their animal status, many of the undead were often accorded attributes which defied the natural order of things. Which one of the following best expresses the claim made in this statement? Okay, human beings often conceptualize the undead as possessing abnormal features. According to the undead, an abnormal status is to reject the natural order of things. No, the undead are defied in nature's order by giving them divine attributes. No, the natural attributes of the undead are rendered abnormal by changing their status. No, the correct answer is number one. Human being conceptualize the undead as possessing abnormal features, because you have got to draw the claim that is made in the statement, right? And the claim that is made is, in order to confirm their abnormal status, many of the undead were often accorded attributes which desired the natural. So that is the answer. The next question: which one of the following statements best describes what the passage is about? So, what is the passage about? Is it all about the shamans and the practice of magic? Exclusively, no. The failure of human beings to fully comprehend their environment? Number two, no. The writer discusses the transition from primitive thinking to the age of enlightenment? No, he doesn't do that. The passage discusses the evolution of theories of the undead from primitive thinking, right, to the age of enlightenment. If you remember, he talked about the primitive people and then he talks about civilization, right, and so forth. So, number four is what you call the correct option. Now, let's come to the next passage. And this is a passage which has to do with a little bit with Marxism and other philosophers, you see. And it has to do with the critical theory of technology, which he says is a political theory of modernity. Now, he mentions, you see, Marx, Foucault, and Habermas. And what is he trying to tell us is, you see, I don't want to go into all that detail about the base and the superstructure in Marxist theory, but then we have got to understand one thing, that is human rights. You see, he takes center stage, you see, while in the background, centralization of ever more powerful public institutions and private organizations imposes an authoritarian social order. The point here is you have the normal people, you have the working class, you have their rights. That is one thing. And the other thing is you have the superstructure where you have all these powerful public institutions and private organizations and who behave in an authoritative manner. In fact, they are born out of the base, you see. Now, look at the way he's talking about the constructivist, what you call technology. I mean, the critical theory of technology, he's talking about what you call the idea that what technology has done, how it goes, that technology, you see, it is actually shaping, you see, the outlines of human system, the human society. It is actually forming the environment, you see, the environmental context, you see, is formed by what you call technology. So then in the next paragraph, he's talking about these things. When he's talking about the capitalist rationalization of production, that many institutions beside the factory and every modern political system, including the so-called socialist system, distractly arose from the problems of command over a disempowered and de-skilled labor force, but everywhere that masses are organized. Now, that's what I said. He's talking about the masses. He's talking about the labor force, the working class. And you see, everything originates for Marx from that, the base and the superstructure, right? And then he talks about what you call, in accordance with the general line of thought, critical theory of technology regards technology as an environment rather than as a collection of tools. Technology is not only tools, it is an environment, and it determines, you see, our way of living, you see, technology, along with the constant pressures to build centers of power. Many other social values and meanings are inscribed in technological design. And an interpretation, that is, the hermeneutics is an interpretation of technology, must make explicit the meanings implicit in the devices we use and the rituals they script. Now, that is important. What does technology stand for? What does it symbolize? You just can't dispose of technology by saying that it has to do with tools, it has to do with devices, it has to do with machines. They are symbolic. He says social histories of technologies such as the bicycle, artificial lighting, or firearms have made important contributions to this type of analysis. Critical theory of technology attempts to build a methodological approach on the lessons of these histories. Okay, so now he has already talked about technology as an environment, and he points out that if technology is an environment, then it shapes, you see, the inhabitants and the laws and customs and everything, you see, they are in sync with that. So that's what he's talking about here. The laws of property represent the interest in ownership and control. Customs such as parental authority represent the interest of childhood in safety and growth. Similarly, the automobile represents its users insofar they are interested in mobility. Interests such as these constitute the version of human nature sanctioned by the society. You see, what he's trying to do is he's trying to make one-to-one parallel with what is natural and what is technology. Technology has a great influence, you see, on the natural order of things. That's what he's trying to point out. He talks about the Frankfurt School, and that's again a school, you see, which involves so many philosophers and thinkers, you see. And he talks about, you see, the alternative suggested by the Frankfurt School. On these terms, nature is what lies at the limit of history, at the point at which society loses the capacity to imprint its meaning on things and control them effectively. The reference here is, of course, not to the nature of natural science, but to the lived nature in which we find ourselves and which we are. This nature reveals itself as that which cannot be totally encompassed by the machinery of the society. And then he says, for the Frankfurt School, human nature in all its transcending force emerges out of a historical context, as that context is depicted in illicit joys, struggles, and pathologies. We can perhaps admit a less romantic conception in which these dimensions of human nature recognized by society are also granted theoretical legitimacy. You see, I read out the entire passage because this seems to be a little complicated and but at the same time important, because he's arguing about two things: identity and non-identity. The concept of nature as non-identity in the Frankfurt School, and you have the limits of history. Everything cannot be totally, you see, measured on technology, on machinery. You see, there are other things that go into that, right? But the basic thing is, it's a Marxist viewpoint that everything has to flow out of the historical context, out of the environment, out of the working class, or what you call that proletariat system, right? This is the critical theory of technology, you see, that he has taken up. And now let's look at the questions. Which one of the following statements could be inferred as supporting the arguments of the passage? Let's see. Number one, technology form the environmental context and shape the contours of human society. The romantic conception of nature referred to by in the passage is the one that requires theoretical legitimacy. It is not human nature but human culture that is represented by institutions such as law and custom. Nature decides the point at which society loses its capacity to control history. Okay, I don't think 2, 3, 4 in any way, you see, support the argument, because the entire passage is about the critical theory of technology. It's not all about the romantic conception or the human nature, law and custom, and you see, nature deciding the point of history. So number one is the correct option. Now let's come to the next question. Which one of the following statements contradicts the argument of the passage? We know the argument of the passage, and if you go through 1, 2, and 3, you will find they don't contradict. The last one contradicts. Masses are organized in patterns set by Foucault's prisons and Habermas' public sphere. It contradicts the argument of the passage. It has nothing to do with, you see, Foucault's prisons and Habermas' public sphere. Foucault, you see, was a philosopher, French philosopher, I think, and he had come with his theory of discourse, you see. So number 4 is the correct option. If you look at number 1, paradoxically, the capitalist rationalization of production is a mark of so-called socialist systems as well. He has already talked about the capitalist rationalization, you see, in the second paragraph. Marx's understanding of the capital rationalization of production and Marcuse' understanding of a project of technological rationality share theoretical inclination. We found that the problems of command over a disempowered and de-skilled labor force gave rise to similar patterns of capitalist rationalization of production wherever masses were organized. I think you have that in what you call paragraph number 2. This trajectory arose from the problems of command over a disempowered and de-skilled labor force, but everywhere masses are organized, right? Now let's look at the next question. Which one of the following statements best reflects the main argument of the 4th paragraph of the passage? As an environment, technologies shape their inhabitants in this respect. Okay, automobiles represent the interest in mobility present in human nature. No, technology, laws, and customs are not unlike each other if considered as institutions. Yes, that is the correct answer. You see, technology, laws, and customs are like each other. You see, when he is using the double negative, it means it is positive. Technology, laws, and customs, he says, are not unlike. That means technology, laws, and customs are like each other if considered as institution, right? Because in Marxist theory, everything is considered as an institution. All customs, all rituals, you see, they are considered as institution. That is the argument in the passage. So number 2 is the correct option. Technology, laws and customs are comparable but dissimilar phenomena. They're dissimilar. They can't be dissimilar because they are treated as institutions. And the last one, technological environments privilege certain dimensions of human nature as effectively no. And now let's come to the next question. All of the following claims can be inferred from the passage except analysis of technologies must engage with their social histories to be able to reveal their implicit and explicit meaning. Yes, I mean, this can be inferred, you see. The critical theory of technology argues that as issues of human rights become more prominent, we lose sight of the ways in which the social order becomes more authoritarian. He has already said that in the first paragraph. Technologies seek to privilege certain dimensions of human nature at a high cost to lived nature. No, that is the answer, you see. 3 is the correct option. Now let's come to this question. He says, having made citizens more or less knowledgeable than their predecessors, the internet has proved to be both a blessing and a curse. Now, if you look at this sentence, you have the citizens more or less knowledgeable than their predecessors. And the second thing is the internet has proved to be both a blessing and a curse. Right. Never before has a population, nearly all of whom has enjoyed at least a secondary school education, has been exposed to do such information, much information, whether in newspapers and magazines or through YouTube, Google, and Facebook. Okay, so we can't have it out here. Yet it is not clear that people today are more knowledgeable than their barely literate predecessors. Contemporary advances in technology offered more serious and inquisitive students access to realms of knowledge previously unimaginable and unavailable. But such readily available knowledge leads many more students away from serious study, the reading of actual text, and toward an inability to write effectively and grammatically. It has let people choose sources that reinforce their opinions rather than encouraging them to question inherited beliefs. So it should be in the final option 4. Having made citizens more or less knowledgeable than their predecessors, the internet has proved to be both a blessing and a curse. It is a concluding state, right? You can see by the tone, it is a concluding state. The passage has 4 different summaries, you see, and you have to choose the correct summary. And when you look for the correct summary, look whether the summary contains the kernel of the sentence, the germ of the what you call passage. Now we'll just go quickly through the passage. Petitioning is an expeditious democratic tradition used frequently in prior centuries by which citizens can bring issues directly to the government. That is petitions. Okay. As expressions of collective voice, they support procedural democracy by shaping agendas. They can also recruit citizens to causes, give voice to the voteless, and apply the discipline of rhetorical argument that clarifies the point of view. By contrast, elections are limited in several respects. They involve only a few candidates and thus fall short of a representative democracy. Further, voters' choice is not specific to particular policies or laws, and elections are episodic, whereas the voice of the people needs to be heard and integrated constantly into the democratic government. And that is the importance of petitioning compared to winning in an electioneering or elected representatives, you see, presenting your case. So now let's come to the options here. By giving citizens greater control over shaping political and democratic agendas, political petitions are invaluable as they represent an ideal form of representative democracy. Now, here he is not talking about the importance of petitioning, you see. He's just giving you what he calls the citizens' greater control over political and democratic agendas, and political petitions are invaluable. What does he mean by political petitions? He's only talking about petitions. That's all. So number 1 cannot be the correct option. Petitioning is definitely more representative of the collective voice. And the functioning of democratic government could improve if we relied more on petitioning rather than holding periodic elections. Now, the first part is okay, but the second part, where does this point come that there is no need to hold elections? So number 2 is incorrect. Citizens become less inclined to petitioning as it enables vocal citizens to shape political agendas, but this needs to change to strengthen democracy. No, this is a very different point. I mean, He's talking about petitioning as an expeditious democratic tradition, and he says the citizens become less inclined to petitioning. No. Petitioning has been important to democratic functioning as it supplements, it adds to the electoral process by enabling ongoing engagement with the government. So, number 4 is the correct option. Now, let's come to the next one. If you look, it's not that modern historians of medieval Africa have been ignorant about contacts between Ethiopia and Europe. They just had the power dynamic reversed. The traditional narrative stressed Ethiopia as weak and in trouble in the face of aggression from external forces. So Ethiopia sought military assistance from their fellow Christians to the north. But the real story, buried in plain sight in medieval diplomatic texts, simply had not yet been put together by modern scholars. Recent research pushes scholars of medieval Europe to imagine a much more richly connected medieval world. At the beginning of the so-called age of exploration, there is evidence that the kings of Ethiopia were sponsoring their own missions of diplomacy, faith, and commerce. Now, he is talking about the distortion of history and how history was written to suit one's own, possibly the European mood. So, if you go through all these options, historians were under the illusion that Ethiopia, what do you mean they were under the illusion? It's nothing of that kind. It has been done deliberately, you see. So, number 1 cannot be the right option. Medieval historical sources selectively promoted the narrative that powerful European forces were called on to protect weak African civilizations, but this is far from reality. Now, he says this is far from reality. He doesn't mention the reality. Well, the first part could be true, but then how can you say that it's not the reality? Number 3, medieval texts have been cherry picked to promote a view of Ethiopia as weak and in need of Europe's military help with aggressive neighbors. But recent studies reveal it was a well-connected and outward-looking culture. So number 3 covers the whole thing. It covers the what you call the last concluding lines also. There is evidence that the kings of Ethiopia were sponsoring their own missions of diplomacy, faith, and commerce. So number 3 is the best summary, because number 4 also, you see, talks about the connection between Christian communities of Ethiopia and Europe, but doesn't say anything that is contained in the original. Number 3 is the correct option. Now let's come to the next exercise. The creative element in product design has become of paramount importance, as it is one of the few ways a firm or industry can sustain a competitive advantage over its rival. In fact, the creative element in the value of world industry would be larger still if we added the contribution of the creative element in other industries, okay, such as the design and so forth. The creative industry is receiving a lot of attention today, as its growth rate is faster than that of the world economy as a whole. So I think number 3 should be the first sentence. The creative industry is receiving a lot of attention today, as its growth rate is faster than that of the world economy as a whole. It is for this reason that today's trade issues are increasing. No, it's not for this reason. So number 4, you see, cannot be the sentence. Number 2 can follow 3. He says, in fact, the creative element in the value of world industry would be larger still if we added the contribution of the creative element in other industries such as the design and tech sector. So 3 should be followed by 2. And then he carries it further by saying the creative element in product design has become of paramount importance. He talks about the creative design, that is number 1. And the last is number 4. So it should be 3, 2, 1, 4. Next one, some company leaders are basing their decisions on locating offices to foster innovation and growth, as their best performing inventors suffered the greatest productivity losses when their commutes grew longer. Shorter commutes support innovation by giving employees more time in the office and greater opportunities for in-person collaboration, while removing the physical strain of a long commute. So he's talking about the short commute and the long commute. Okay, and this is not always the case. You can't begin the sentence with this. So it cannot be the first sentence. Some see the link between long commutes but the first sentence should be number 2, which talks about the short commute and the long commute. Right? He's talking about the short commutes that support innovation, and then he talks about more time in the office and greater opportunities for in-person collaboration. after 2, some company leaders are basing their decisions on locating offices to foster innovation and growth, as their best performing inventors suffered the greatest productivity losses when their commutes grew longer. So he is talking about the shorter commutes and the longer commutes in number 1. So 2 should be followed by number 1. And after 1, you have 4, because he's talking about the link between the long commutes and productivity. And the final sentence is number 3. This is not always the case, right? So you have 2, 1, 4, 3. Now we have the a similar kind of exercise. He says easing the anxiety and pressure of having a big day is part of the appeal for many couples who marry in secret. Okay, so wedding season is upon us, and after 2 years of COVID chaos that saw nuptials scaled back, you may think the temptation would be to go all out. But instead of expanding the guest list, many couples are opting to have entirely secret ceremonies. With COVID case numbers remaining high and the cost of living crisis meaning that many couples are feeling the pinch, it's no wonder that some are less than eager to send out invites. They don't want to send out invites. Okay, plus, it can't hurt that in celebrity circles. Now, what can't hurt, we don't know, right? I would definitely say that secret weddings are becoming more common, says land is Bejer. And then in the fourth one, you have people are looking for ways to get out of the spotlight and avoid the pomp and circumstance of weddings. I think this sentence would best fit in option 2, right? Where he says that some are less eager to send out invites. Then you have the easing the anxiety and pressure of having a big day is part of the appeal for many couples who marry in secret. So I think option 2 is the correct option here. The next exercise, you have to arrange that in proper sequence. Fish skin's collagen has an excellent thermostability and tensile strength, making it ideal for use as bandage that adheres to the skin and adjusts to body movements. Collagen, one of the main structural proteins in connective tissues in the human body, is well known for promoting skin regeneration. Now, by looking at the very sentence, we can make out that number 2 should be the first sentence. It's a general sentence about collagen. And then fish skin swims in here as diseases and bacteria that affect eye fish are different from most human pathogens. The risk of introducing disease agents into other species through the use of pig and cow collagen proteins for wound healing has inhibited its broader applications in the medical field. It refers to what? It refers to collagen. So 2 should be followed by number 4. And after number 4, you have number 3, and then the last is number 1. Now let's come to the next exercise. All that we think we know about life hangs together is really some kind of illusion, and that we have perpetrated on ourselves because of our limited vision. What appear to be inanimate objects such as stones turn out not only to be alive in the same way that we are, but also in many infinitesimal ways to be affected by stimuli just as humans are. Okay, you know what he's talking about. You see, we are in a kind of illusion sometimes, and we have a limited vision, because he says even inanimate objects, you see, like stones, you see, they may be alive and they may respond to any stimuli, external stimuli. The distinction between animate and inanimate simply cannot be made when you enter the world of quantum mechanics and try to determine how those apparent subatomic particles, of which you and everything else in our universe is composed, are all tied together. Point is that physics and metaphysics show there is a pattern to the universe that goes beyond our capacity to grasp it with our brain. So let us look at the correct option here. The effect of stimuli is similar in inanimate objects when compared to animate objects or living beings. It's that is not the main thing in the passage, you see. Arbitrary distinctions between inanimate and animate objects disappear at the scale at which quantum mechanics works. That is the point he's trying to tell us, right? So number 2 is the correct option. It sums up the whole thing. Rather, it is a essence. You see, quantum physics indicates that an astigmatic view of the reality results in erroneous assumptions about the universe. No, the inanimate world is both sentient and cognitive like its. No, that's not the point. It's only is talking about the arbitrary distinction between the inanimate and animate objects disappear at the scale at which quantum mechanics. So number two is the correct option.